Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this virtual forum of primary candidates for Montgomery County Council, sponsored by Bethesda Beat and Bethesda Magazine. Thank you for joining us. We are recording this event. The recording will be posted on BethesdaMagazine.com and distributed to all registrants. I'm your moderator, Ann Talent, executive editor of Bethesda Magazine and Bethesda Beat. We are part of Z-Pop Media, the leading media company in Montgomery County, the publisher of Bethesda Magazine and Bethesda Beat. Bethesda Beat is an award-winning site covering breaking news and key issues, not just in the Bethesda area, but across the county, particularly Montgomery County education, county government, and public safety. We're proud to present this forum and provide a means to explore important issues and give you, the voters, a window into the positions and approaches of those who aspire to make our laws, spend taxpayer money, and operate our county government. Now I'm going to hand the floor to Lee McDonald, our membership director, for an important announcement.
Hi, everyone. And can you see me? For some reason, my background is just displaying, but I don't actually. Oh, here we go.
There you are.
There I am.
Great to see you.
It was an absentia. So thanks, Anne, for tossing me the mic. For those of you who joined District 2 and for the first session, you've already seen my face. So thanks for humoring me again. As Anne said, I'm the membership director here at Bethesda Beat. And if you subscribe to our emails or if you've been on our website lately, I'm sure you've seen that our spring campaign is underway. We already have 1,500 members, and we're so thankful for each and every one of you that have taken a stand for our quality local journalism. But each month we actually serve over 350,000 readers, and that means that less than 1% of our readers financially support our work. So we are asking if people that value our coverage and this event to take a stand for local journalism. This campaign is one of the key ways we raise funds for our newsroom throughout the year. So if you do find this event valuable, we are dropping a link in the chat that you can use to join our membership program. So keep an eye out for that. Okay, thank you, Anne. Back to you.
Thanks, Lee. Ashley, are we in a position to proceed?
Yeah. Yes. So if you are an at-large candidate, I know I had you turn off your videos before, but if you all could start turning those on, that would be great for who we have. Great. You guys are pros at it. So, and if we have anyone join us a little bit later, we will proceed now and they will jump in, but Anne will get us started off here. Thank you, Anne.
Thanks, Ashley. For this hour, we are delighted to hear from primary candidates for at-large seats. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to each question and 30 seconds for rebuttal if they wish. During the answer, once the candidate has 30 seconds left on the clock, we will flag them. At the end of the allotted time, the candidate will be permitted to finish their sentence. If they continue to speak past that, they will be muted by the host. Candidates, please raise your hand virtually in Zoom if you want to rebut so we can see you. Now, I'm pleased to introduce the candidates, and I think everyone is with us. Gabe Albornoz, Brandy Brooks, Dana Gassaway, Evan Glass, Scott Goldberg, Tom Hucker, Will Jawando, and Lori Ann Sales. We'll open by giving the candidates a chance to introduce themselves while at the same time asking them to address our first question. What qualifications do you feel you bring to the table in running for this position? We'll begin in alphabetical order and we'll switch it up as we go along. We'll start with Mr. Albornoz, 2 minutes.
Well, thank you everybody for organizing this event and your important contribution to journalism, which has never been more important than right now, quite frankly. So I am a lifelong resident of Montgomery County, the proud son of 2 immigrant parents that immigrated here from South America and met as students at Montgomery College. And I have lived in Montgomery County all but 2 years of my 46 years on this planet, and grew up in Gaithersburg, Silver Spring, and Bethesda, which provides a wide perspective on a number of the communities as they've developed over so many years. And I live in Kensington now with my wife, Catherine, and our 4 kids. I've dedicated my career to public service, worked in the nonprofit sector for 8 years, and then worked in the Leggett administration as the director of the recreation department in the Leggett cabinet. and now have served 4 years on the County Council, chairing the Health and Human Services Committee and serving as president this year. I haven't seen everything, but I've seen a lot. And I helped direct our Department of Recreation through the depths of the recession when our budget was cumulatively cut by almost 40%. And I have helped steer the Committee for Health and Human Services through a global pandemic. I am proud of my policy accomplishments, eliminating vaping products for our kids within a mile of schools, being the first jurisdiction to ban ghost guns in the state of Maryland. And I have spent a lot of my time focusing on public health. I bring to the table over 20 years of experience in building bridges and a passion for this work that has never wavered. And I think that leadership and experience will be especially important for this next council with so many new members. And I look forward to answering the rest of the questions this evening and hope that you'll consider supporting me for a second term. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Ms. Brooks.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much to Bethesda Magazine and Bethesda Beat for hosting this critically important series of forums this evening. And thank you to all of you who have joined us. My name is Brandy Brooks. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a racial and environmental justice consultant who lives in Kensington. I and my family moved here to Montgomery County about 7 years ago, seeking, as many people do in this county, the opportunity to find good housing and the opportunity to find a beautiful place to live. I'm very proud to be running once again to represent the county as an at-large council member. A lot of folks ask me, what does a racial equity environmental justice consultant do? And really, I want to talk about the top 3 skills that I bring to this. The first is that willingness and ability to have difficult conversations about some of the most intractable challenges that we face in our society and our communities. The second is the ability to really understand how different people's lived experience shapes their attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors, and the things that they bring to those challenging conversations. And then the third skill is really about being able to synthesize that understanding in order to craft solutions that multiple groups of diverse stakeholders can agree on and move forward with. And that's the kind of leadership that we need in Montgomery County right now, because we are facing incredibly difficult challenges that we have been dealing with for decades around equity, around housing, around how we are going to address things like climate change. And we need to have someone who has the skills and the knowledge and the experience to talk about the roots of those challenges and to really help us build together as a whole county in crafting the solutions that will help all of us to thrive. So I'm excited to be here for tonight's forum, and I look forward to answering the questions.
Thank you. Mr. Gassaway.
Can you hear me?
Yes, although if you could turn on your camera, that would be great too.
Yeah, every time I try it, it's saying that the host will not allow me. And I don't know why that is. I'll try it one more time.
I just sent you a notification to say, I think we're good, maybe. There we are.
There we go.
Ta-da.
All right. Hello, it's a pleasure meeting everyone. My name is Dana Gassaway. My qualifications here, as Mr. Albanez said, I'm a lifelong member of Montgomery County. I'm a descendant of slaves from Montgomery County. This is my hometown. This is where I live. I've gone to school here. I'm a product of Montgomery Hills Junior High School, if anyone remembers that, and Northwood High School. I'm a former biology teacher. I'm a small business owner. The reason why I got into this race is because the way that I felt the county was going in terms of the county council wasn't the way that I thought democracy should work. Franklin said when he was asked what type of government did he give us, his quote was, "We gave you a republic if you can keep it." And I look at Montgomery County in the way that I feel personally that the county and some of the other county government organizations have been acting toward the public. It's not in a way in which it's public friendly. So one of my jobs, I think, as an at-large county council member will be to make sure that government is accessible for everyone. And I feel because of my unique experience being the descendant of slaves and having parents who went through segregated schools in Montgomery County, I can not only understand, but have a sense of realism behind what has happened to people in Montgomery County who have been disenfranchised. So I'm all about not only helping people come to realize and
30 seconds.
and come to fruition with their happiness in Montgomery County, but I'm also about helping businesses get started and being successful within the county. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Glass.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much. And I want to extend my appreciation to you and the entire team at Bethesda Beat and Bethesda Magazine. As a former journalist myself, I'm heartened to know that local journalism is alive here, and we need to continue supporting you and supporting our community and local discussion. So thank you. To everybody who's joining us tonight, I am Evan Glass, and my husband and I live in Silver Spring with our 2 dogs, and I have the honor of serving as the council's vice president this year. But before getting to the council, I'll share a little bit about you and about the lived experiences that I bring to this role. I grew up on Long Island, New York, in a home with a single mother who worked 2 jobs. And I learned a lot about struggle and about economic opportunity from my mother. I came down to Washington, D.C. to attend American University, and then I embarked upon a 12-year career as a journalist at CNN. And after CNN, I ran a youth-serving nonprofit here in Montgomery County. And it's the combination of all of those life experiences that I think have prepared me well and set me up for what I think has been a very important first term. And during that first term, I've done a lot of work for the residents of Montgomery County to improve your lives and the lives of your family members. The first piece of legislation I passed was the Pay Equity Act, and homage to my mother and bringing paycheck fairness and parity to Montgomery County government.
30 seconds.
I also passed the Housing Justice Act to expand our housing discrimination laws, and I've made our buses free for all kids, increasing ridership dramatically. We live in a beautifully diverse community here, but we have work to do to make it better and more inclusive for everyone. And I look forward to this evening's conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Goldberg.
And thank you. I wish I had some exciting news to make to help with your membership drive, but unfortunately, I'm going to share one of the least interesting bios ever. But I want to keep it simple because you're going to hear a lot of great candidates today and get a lot of great information. I'm a dad, Democrat, attorney, and small business owner. As a dad, my wife, Dara, and I live with our 2 children who attend MCPS schools in the Four Corners neighborhood of Silver Spring, along with our 14-year-old dog named Gus. As a Democrat, I was chair of the Montgomery County Democratic Party for 2 years, managed Ike Leggett's reelection in 2014, helped Jamie Raskin set up his congressional run a year later, and have just been a lifelong Democrat. As an attorney, I went to the University of Maryland School of Law at night, commuting from Silver Spring to Baltimore for 3.5 years, practiced a little real estate law, but in the last 2 years had the honor and privilege of representing tenants in court on kind of one of the worst days of their lives where they're about to lose their housing. But we were able to keep most, if not all of them, in their house until they could work something out, which was truly rewarding work. And then as a small business owner, started a small residential property management company caring for foreign service officers and military members' homes while they're overseas serving our nation. We've got 15 employees. I think all of those things qualify me to be on the county council, working with people that I disagree with, solving problems, working in the housing industry, and certainly being in Montgomery County for almost 2 decades. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hucker.
Thanks, Ann, and thanks everybody at Bethesda Beat and all of you for joining us. I come to public service using my training as a community organizer and advocate and nonprofit director over 30 years. So I'm trained and very experienced at bringing people together to get things done. It's in my DNA at this point. I know firsthand to get anything done, you have to engage the people most affected, help them understand the barriers, hear their proposals, find common ground. That's the name of the game, working with government agencies to get difficult things done. I'm a longtime resident. I live in Silver Spring with my wife and 2 kids who I drop off at public school every morning. And I represented Montgomery County for 8 years as a state lawmaker before being elected to the county council. I know county taxpayers can't and shouldn't pay for everything ourselves. So having relationships in Annapolis to win funding for our roads and our transit and our schools is a huge asset I can bring to the table. I've been twice elected by my colleagues over the last 2 years to serve as the council's president and vice president, to lead the county council and the county's board of health through COVID and this terrible recession. And we had a very productive year. We put over $260 million on the street for rental assistance, emergency food relief, grants for our small businesses. I chaired our board of health and worked with colleagues to keep our most vulnerable residents safe. We had to dedicate new funding to address our racial inequities in the county's response. And at the end of the year, Dr. Fauci praised our performance under my leadership. We also got awards from the NAACP and from affordable housing leaders for our investment in innovative programming in affordable housing.
30 seconds.
And I assembled a statewide coalition that won $1 billion in state aid for our most vulnerable residents and small businesses. We have tremendous challenges in front of us, fixing our schools, addressing our mental health crisis and our housing crisis and our climate emergency. And you'll need experienced people back on the county council to get those done in the next 4 years. So that's why I'm asking for your vote to do just that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Tawando.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us and thank you for doing this. It's really good to engage the public in this way. I'm Will Jawando. I'm an at-large member of the council. I serve in the Education and Culture Committee where I'm lead for libraries. And one of the great things I did over the last 4 years was do over 100 episodes of story time with Councilmember Will Jawando that we actually did some partnership, I think, one time with Bethesda Beat. And we read to kids when everything was shut down. I was born and raised here. My wife and Michelle and I are raising our 4 children here. We have public school students. And when I ran 4 years ago, I talked about something called the Montgomery County Promise. And it's a microcosm of the American dream that I think is uniquely possible here in Montgomery County, that everyone who lives here has access to a great school, a safe neighborhood, to a job that pays a living wage, and can retire with dignity in a welcoming community. And for many, including my dad, who immigrated to this country in the 70s from Nigeria, and my mom who migrated internally from Kansas, it has offered that for many. But we know, and I experienced growing up in low-income, poorly maintained rental housing here in the county for much of my life, taking public transportation, that it's unequally doled out. And our job is to make sure that everyone can achieve their potential and have the opportunity to do so. I'm proud of my leadership on the council, taking bold steps to help make that more possible, setting up a public-private partnership called Food for Montgomery that leveraged $10 million from the county to start and raised over $2.5 million from the private sector to make sure no one in our county goes hungry. Passing the first ever countywide rent stabilization to make sure during COVID that people were able to stay in their homes and stay secure. Working on landmark affordable housing legislation along with colleagues to expand the types of dwelling units and the size and scope of housing we have so that we can make it more affordable, more accessible. And also working on criminal justice reform. Yeah, we got a Zoom bomber there. Also working on criminal justice reform to pass the first ever bill of this council, which was the Law Enforcement Trust and Transparency Act, to make sure there's accountability and high standards and everyone is treated fairly under the law. Many of those bills were taken by the state and passed as statewide legislation.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Sales.
it. I'm sorry. Oh, I didn't get my 30-second notice there, did I?
I gave you.
It was when the Zoom bomber came.
Yes.
I thought that was what you said. Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead. Thank you. I'm done.
And as a reminder, really quick, nobody should be able to turn their videos on, but for people, if you're going to be doing that, you will be asked to leave the room and we will remove you. So please, if you're not a candidate, please keep your video and your sound off. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much to Bethesda Beat and Bethesda Magazine for hosting this forum. I'm an avid reader of this piece, of this newsletter, and really appreciate the outpouring of support for the attendees that have joined us this evening. My name is Lorianne Sales, and I am an experienced lawmaker, mother of an MCPS, Montgomery College, and soon to be University of Maryland College Park, by way of Universities at Shady Grove graduate, who's also graduating from the School of Communications. And so this is especially important to me this evening. I'm running to bring smart government to Montgomery County at a time that calls for trusted, tested, and experienced leadership. Trusted after serving 4 years during the most difficult times in our nation's history, leading the most diverse city in the country through a difficult time where we were ground zero during the pandemic, growing our biotech corridor by attracting national businesses like Novavax and growing it past the west side of our city. And also experienced leadership, ensuring that during these difficult times, our economy remains strong, while we also balance some of the challenges before us, like the racial unrest. The qualities that I bring to this role, having our own police department, our own planning commission.
30 seconds.
Is ensuring that we modernized our police department. We are prioritizing the efforts to revitalize our economy. And I look forward to sharing even more about our SMART agenda that will certainly bring our economy towards the future success that Montgomery County can and should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sales. The lack of affordable housing remains a problem throughout Montgomery County. What steps do you think are necessary to increase the quantity of this type of housing in the area? And in a related matter, do you agree with the strategies for increasing housing supply in the proposed Thrive Montgomery 2050 plan? And would you favor adoption of Thrive if you were now on the council, as several of you are? The order for this question will be Mr. Jawando, Mr. Goldberg, Mr. Hucker, Ms. Sales, Mr. Albernaz, Mr. Glass, Mr. Gassaway, and Ms. Brooks. Mr. Jawando, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm on the Fed committee. I think I'm the only one here. Yeah, I am the only one here that is. And we had 9 sessions on Thrive. I worked very hard, used my own staff time to have extra community outreach sessions on Thrive because there was a lot of confusion and a lot of communities that didn't even know what Thrive was, that were kind of bread and butter communities. For example, the NAACP wasn't consulted and other groups. And so I worked hard on that. We're going through a process now where we're engaging in a racial equity process to get other groups' feedback on this 30-year plan, which is important, designing the land use and housing and what our community is going to look like. And I do think there are a lot of good things in Thrive as far as concepts, right? About 15-minute living, about developing in a transit-oriented way so people can get to work and to jobs, minimizing our environmental footprint. But we need to engage everybody. And so I voted it out of committee. I think the concepts in it are sound, but we need to have more input. And it's important to note too that the conversation will continue, because to implement any part of Thrive, they're going to need to be council actions like zoning text amendments, master plans, and the like. And making sure that people can afford to live here, making sure that they can get to work, and that there's a accessible transit to do so. Those are going to be really important parts of how we plan and how we develop our land use. So I think overall Thrive has good concepts.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I think overall Thrive has good concepts in it. And we did a lot of work to improve it, myself personally and colleagues in Fed. And we'll go through the process and the rest of the council to get it across the finish line. But I think overall, we need to work on institutionalizing better engagement and outreach strategies from the beginning, so that we're not in this position again where we have to kind of do it on the back end.
Thank you. Mr. Goldberg.
So the reason I'm running for the county council is to make sure that people have increased opportunities, economically speaking, and that they have a place to afford to have a roof over their head. So some ideas that I have to increase the amount of housing that we have is social housing, which is using county land and the land of religious institutions that want to participate to construct buildings that are mixed income. The second biggest cost driver of building a building is the cost of land. If we can get it for zero, we can build much less expensive housing. Another idea I have is micro vouchers. So a lot of people don't need a lot of help. They just need a little bit of help so they're not rent burdened. So micro vouchers would be an assistance program where every month someone would get a small amount, $200-300, and that they can afford that middle class lifestyle in Montgomery County. In terms of Thrive, so this is a document that says we should look at the next 30 years through the year 2050 with a lens towards racial equity, the environment, and economic development. These are all good things. I think we can all agree these are lenses in which we should view the world and our future and our county. To answer your question, it's a nuanced answer, but to answer your question, if I am on the county council when it comes up for a vote, it's getting refined right now. I don't see myself voting against it. I would be a yes vote for it so that we can move on to the real work of being able to do these zoning text amendments and sector plans and master plans and adjacent plans to start really building more housing, because people need housing now and we're already behind the ball. And the housing that we're not building today is the housing 2 and 3 generations. That's going to be the naturally occurring affordable housing that we're just not going to have. So we continue to dig a deeper and deeper hole for ourselves.
Thank you. Mr. Hucker.
Thanks, Ann. Look, I think we should think about first principles. Quality and affordable housing is a fundamental right for every resident. It's especially true for those who need housing the most, young families looking for housing, to have a part of the American dream, seniors looking to downsize and to live near all the amenities that they need. It's central to the American dream. It's been a core principle of the Democratic Party since FDR. I've worked hard with the previous administration under Mr. Leggett to build a record amount of housing in Montgomery County. So we know it can be done, including lots of affordable housing, lots of senior housing, lots of accessible housing for young families. I serve on the board of the Council of Governments, and we in the Council of Governments, all the major jurisdictions, 24 jurisdictions, DC, Montgomery County, Maryland, and Virginia, we hired the best consultants we could find, and they did the research, and we declared a housing crisis, all 24 jurisdictions. We committed in Montgomery County alone to build 4,100 homes a year, 75% of which are affordable for the next 10 years, each year for the next 10 years. Last year in Montgomery County, we only reached 29% of that goal, less than 50% in the previous year. So we need to get much more serious about reaching our commitment to the region to provide the housing that we need for the future, for our young families that are moving to Montgomery County in droves because we're so desirable, for our seniors looking to downsize, and for so many others. Muriel Bowser, the mayor of DC, committed $1 billion to affordable housing in the last several years, and we have not done that, and we need to. And we need to work closely with the executive branch to make that happen. Thrive is very much a work in progress. There's lots of opportunities for public input, but I like the vision of 15-minute communities so we have short commutes, and it envisions a serious doubling down of smart growth. You're either for smart growth or sprawl. I'm for smart growth. That's been our commitment for 2 generations. We need to do more, and Thrive is part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sales.
So part of my SMART agenda is making a living in our county more affordable. I moved to Montgomery County because of its affordable housing program, the moderately priced dwelling unit program. In the city of Gaithersburg, our set aside is 15% for any new development. And we have worked with developers who have provided over and above 15%, 20%, sometimes 25%. So those are the sort of developers and projects that we need to be fast tracking to ensure that we're building affordable housing near transit so we can support transit-oriented development, get more cars off the road. We also need to ensure that we are supporting funding for rental assistance and also for our seniors who are on limited budgets. We also need to ensure that there's pathways to home ownership. One of the quickest ways for us to close the racial wealth gap and for families to build wealth independently is to own a business or own property. And so these are the sorts of initiatives that we need to be supporting and advocating and growing. During the pandemic, we were able to stand up programs that helped landlords see through this time, that capped rental increases. So these are the sort of initiatives, the best practices that we should take with us forward and see how we can implement them wider. As far as Thrive goes, having just
30
approved
seconds.
The Lake Forest Mall Master Plan, working with the community over the course of a year, having meetings with multiple organizations, I think that's something that's lacking with Thrive. And I look forward to working with the new council to get it passed if this council is unable to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Albornoz.
Thanks, Ann. So fundamentally, we have a supply and demand issue, and we have a lot more demand than supply of housing at all levels. And this is something that we have to address through multiple angles. One, we have to take better advantage of the assets that we already have. So for example, the county has parking garages that are immediately close to metro stations that could be converted to housing units. And through public-private partnerships, that is something that I think can be achieved. We also need to look at commercial properties and determine whether or not it makes sense to enter into public-private partnerships to see how many of those we can convert to housing. There was a project in downtown Silver Spring that was very successful in converting a dilapidated old commercial office building into micro-unit condominiums that have been very popular. We also need to look at the seas of asphalt that we have within our faith-based institutions and other organizations and see if we can create partnerships to see if we can leverage those spaces to be able to build more housing options within those particular communities. Those steps, I think, will make a difference. We also need to, the expansion of the accessory dwelling unit policy, which was enacted by this council and expanded by this council, is another example of us taking advantage of assets that we already have before us. But we also have to look at opportunities to meet
30
our
seconds.
development and property owners part of the way to make sure that we follow through on smart growth principles. And with regards to Thrive, overall, the document needed to be undertaken so that we can update a general plan that hasn't been updated in more than 30 years, but still have a lot more work to do to make sure that it actually is able to implement what it states its goals are.
Thank you. Mr. Glass.
We all know that Montgomery County is an incredibly expensive place to live. It is expensive for people who recently moved here and for those who've lived here all their lives or for decades. And we know that it is increasingly more and more expensive and more out of reach for our kids and our grandkids. And that is why I am committed to creating more housing that is affordable. And in order to have more affordable housing, we need to build housing. And before getting elected to the council, I actually served as vice president of Montgomery Housing Partnership, which is the county's largest nonprofit developer of affordable housing. And those are the skills and the knowledge that I've brought to the council to help move us forward in this regard. And I'll also share with you that when the pandemic first began, I had a number of residents contact me through various means expressing concerns about being able to pay their rent and about being able to stay in their home without having job security or facing other types of economic anxiety. And that is why I moved forward with the support of all of my colleagues, the COVID Rental Relief Fund. And that started off as a $2 million fund to keep people safely in their home. And thanks to President Biden and Democrats in Congress, and yes, even Governor Larry Hogan and Democrats in Annapolis, that $2 million has grown to more than $100 million. And we've kept
30 seconds.
We've kept more than 30,000 people safely in their homes. And we need to continue with our rental assistance program. Finally, with regard to Thrive, that is a once in a generation visionary document. And as has been noted, we are required by law to approve a general plan, which is what it is. And my guiding principle throughout the council's review of this is to make sure that it facilitates and supports housing that is more affordable for residents into the future. And that's
Time.
what we're going to be working on.
Thank you. Mr. Gassaway. You may be muted.
There you go.
There you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. This is really what I wanted to talk about. The council has for years talked about smart growth. This growth has been anything but smart. It's been wanton and uncontrollable. The council has allowed developers to overdevelop this area. 85% of the usable land in Montgomery County is just about gone. The ag reserve, even though it's 90-some thousand acres, it is not even nearly enough to support us if we ever had an emergency and we ever needed food. Ag reserve needs to be at least 3 times its size if we really were going to think about it feeding us in the case of an emergency. Also, as far as dealing with homes and living spaces, Thrive 2050, it was based on the Wedge and Corridors program of 1964, which was a presidential racist, if I would say, program that took a lot of land from relatives of mine and other people in this county, and it has never been rectified or corrected by the county in any way, shape, or form. What should we do about living spaces in Montgomery County, because they are in need? Well, let's look at Montgomery Village and let's look at the mall there. There's 100 acres of land there that we could easily turn into living space. The roads are already there. The area is already paid for housing. We could put the stores underground, have like an underground shopping thing, like they do in Atlanta and some other places, and use that area.
30 seconds.
Also, I think the first time that we actually looked at greenhouse gases, it was in 2019, and how they affected the flora and fauna in Montgomery County. The council and a lot of other people in this county have done a poor job of stewardship as far as it goes with this county.
Thank you. Ms. Brooks.
Thank you. Housing justice is a core component of my campaign platform. I'm proud to be on the board of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance and to be, I believe, the only person running for an at-large seat who is currently a renter, like nearly 40% of our county right now. I believe that addressing affordable housing, one, starts with making sure that people who are here in our county are stable in their homes. And I want to note that in just 4 days, the county's rent stabilization law that has protected tens of thousands of renters in Montgomery County will be allowed to expire by the current council, exacerbating the affordable housing issues that we have here in the county. When it comes to producing more affordable housing, I think it's critical that we look at strategies that deeply focus on equity in the way that we produce affordable housing. This can include things like social housing. This can include the county using its right of first refusal to purchase rental properties and take them out of the speculative real estate market so that we can develop more affordable housing, and also supporting community-based solutions like community land trusts and cooperatives that allow community members to get more into the business of developing our own housing. When it comes to Thrive, I've had the honor of not only being a community participant, but also a facilitator and designer of participatory planning and policy development processes. Thrive was not it. It was conducted during a pandemic when a majority of our most marginalized residents simply couldn't participate. And I support calls by organizations like the Montgomery County Racial Equity Network and their allies for a truly just planning process, which would actually take about 12 to 18 months to actually include the communities that have not had a voice in shaping Thrive to date, as opposed to simply taking a couple of months to invite them to comment on strategies that have already been developed largely without their input.
All right, I'm going to change up the rules midstream because to get through a few more questions, we're not going to do rebuttals. So moving on to the next question, I'm also going to make it a little bit.
So I should take my hand down then, I guess. Okay.
Sorry. I'm just trying to make the most of the time that we have. So this next question will be a little bit of a speed round. We're going to go to 1 minute questions. This is kind of specific. Start specifically to Ms. Brooks, but then expands to the other candidates. Ms. Brooks, you have recently lost endorsements in light of misconduct claims by a former campaign worker. What do you say to those allegations and to concerns about your judgment? And to the other candidates, how does character factor into qualifications? For this round, certainly let Ms. Brooks begin, and then we'll go to Mr. Glass, Mr. Albernaz, Ms. Sales, Mr. Goldberg, Mr. Hucker, Mr. Joando, and Mr. Gassaway. Ms. Brooks, 1 minute.
Great, thank you. I think the first thing I'll say is that not everything that has been alleged or written about me in the media is accurate, but what is accurate is that I had a conversation with a staff member that was not appropriate. We went into mediation around that process, developed a resolution plan with that staff member, which I faithfully carried out. And I believe that that's the kind of model that we should actually have for how elected officials, all of whom are human and all of whom will make mistakes, actually are accountable for their actions and make plans for restoration and repair. One of the things that I think is deeply difficult about the situation that I've been facing over the last several weeks is that it makes it difficult to make that proposition to other public leaders. If we believe that whenever we acknowledge when we've made an error, that the most likely outcome is going to be the destruction of our reputation and career.
30 seconds.
I think for those who want to make sure that we have accountability from our public leaders, we also need to set the conditions for that accountability to happen and to do so in a way that respects everyone's humanity and dignity.
Thank you. Mr. Glass.
Public service requires public trust, and that trust is ultimately determined by all of you who are here on this Zoom, by the voters. And the reason I'm participating in this conversation this evening is so that you can hear directly from me. And should you have any questions about things I've said, things I didn't say, about positions I've taken, or questions about me as a person, feel free to follow up with me, because as a former journalist, I understand that sunlight and openness and transparency are essential. And so I just want to use this as an opportunity to thank all of you for engaging in local democracy. I know sometimes we forget that there are local, county, and municipal elections, but all of you understand the important power
15 seconds.
role that we all have here in Montgomery County, and thank you all for being engaged.
Thank you. Mr. Albernaz.
So this job carries with it a tremendous amount of responsibility, responsibility to be able to move forward policies that pursue the common good, responsibility to ensure full transparency and accountability to constituents and residents, and a responsibility to hold forward, to carry forward foundational issues that are important, such as character. And character drives so much of our decision-making, and our life experiences help derive that character. And all of my personal and professional life experiences coming together are what make me up as a person. And as we deal with very complex issues, it's character that is something that is paramount and something that can never be taken for granted. So it's something I take very seriously, and we have to hold ourselves to the highest possible ethical standards. Our constituents demand it and deserve it.
Thank you. Ms. Sales.
Thank you for the question. When people ask why I'm running, I let them know that more than ever before, we need trusted, tested, and experienced leadership. Trusted first and foremost, because we are public figures. We are overseeing over $6 billion, representing 1.1 million residents. And so when you go to the polls on July 19th, you vote your values. You vote for the people who will be good stewards of the county's resources. You vote for people who can work well with others and build consensus, regardless of the environment or the situation. There's lots to do to get our community to move forward. And
15 seconds.
As far as, what sort of, traits are required for leadership in the public sphere, It's ensuring that integrity, trust, and transparency are first and foremost.
Thank you. Mr. Goldberg.
Trust is never more important than when we would disagree. I like to joke that the person I disagree with most in this world, we're going to celebrate our 14th wedding anniversary in July. But as an elected official, I'm asking you to trust me with $25 billion over the next 4 years. And we are not going to agree all the time. We're not going to agree possibly most of the time. We might not even agree some of the time. But the voters and residents of Montgomery County and the hundreds of thousands of people on this call need to know where we are all coming from and know that that's a place of integrity and honesty and transparency. So when we do disagree, that they know and understand that we might have different judgments, but Scott Goldberg voted a way that in his own mind and determination is going to be best for Montgomery County. And there's nothing more important than that.
Thank you. Mr. Hucker.
It's my view, Ann, that we need experienced leadership on this new council more than ever. We've been through an incredibly difficult the last 2 years, living through the worst pandemic since, in 100 years, and the worst recession since the Great Depression statistically. And that's why I believe we are going to have, on a newly expanded council with at least half brand new members, very experienced leadership to get us through the challenges ahead and to get our fair share of resources from both the state and the federal government that are providing a record amount of funding to local governments if we take advantage of it. My record at this point speaks for itself. I've cast thousands of votes. I've passed dozens of laws at the state level and the county level. I was ranked as the most progressive member of the General Assembly in Annapolis.
15 seconds.
And the best supporter of educators by the Maryland State Educators Association. And that's why over 20 organizations have endorsed me at this point, because I have so many trusting relationships with so many community leaders, nurses, firefighters, social workers, all across the county with whom I've worked to get things done. And that's what I want to continue to do. Thank you.
Mr. Jawando.
Yes, character is important, of course. I think authenticity is important. Trust and transparency are important. Before being elected, I founded 2 nonprofits, Our Voices Matter and the African Immigrant Caucus, which were about communities that did not have voice and had less trust of government because they were disenfranchised and disengaged, helping them use their own power to advocate for the policies and for the funding that they need for their communities. And so I think people power is where it's at. I think folks have to make decisions about the folks they elect to hope that they will represent their voices in a very transparent and authentic way. That's what I've tried to model. I'm very consistent. I think what I say is what I mean, public and in private.
15 seconds.
And I think that's something that is unfortunately sometimes can be lacking in politics. I've been in politics for a long time at the federal, state, and local level, but I try to model that, and I think it's important.
Thank you. Mr. Gassaway. I think you're muted. You're still muted.
There you go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I want to start by saying that when I was a young man and my family lived in, if anyone knows Grub Road near Friendly Garden, I was one day walking all the way down on Rockville Pike near the old Rockville High School, and someone wound the window down and he said, "Aren't you Paul's boy? Aren't you Peggy's boy?" That's my mother and my father. So I was recognized and identified by my parents, even though I was all the way in Rockville and I lived all the way somewhere else. I say that simply to say that the first thing that comes to a person when they see a person is who you are and who you belong to and what you stand for. I'm from Montgomery County. You're going to see me on the streets. You're going to see me doing my daily life, walking around with my son, with my soon-to-be wife. You can trust me because I'm here with you. I'm one of you. I've been here since day one. My family's been here since the 1700s. I'm going to be here you can rely on me. You can count on me.
Thank you. We're going to do one more 1-minute question. Again, a little bit of a speed round. So we'll push a slightly past 7, but then we'll move to the other district sessions. The last question: crime is increasing countywide. What advice would you have for the county's police chief and other officials to stem crime? At the same time, do you feel that the county executive and the current council have taken sufficient steps to ensure police accountability, which has emerged as a nationwide issue in recent years? The order for this question will be Mr. Gassaway, Mr. Glass, Mr. Albernaz, Ms. Brooks, Mr. Juando, Ms. Sales, Mr. Goldberg, and Mr. Hucker. Mr. Gassaway, 1 minute.
Okay. I wrote first initially, the legal system must give the respect it deserves. Our officers must be devoid of systematic prejudice and show our courts, and our courts must be willing to show mercy and compassion. So I say that simply to say that policing has to come from a position of treating people as human beings. Now, I understand some people are going to be criminals and they're going to go through the criminal process. But I think the more that we elevate ourselves and treat people with a modicum of respect, the more likely we are to have better outcomes. I think if you go in with an attitude of treating someone as a criminal and as less than, then you're going to get that expected result because you're looking for them to be negative. So I think, in short, our police need to not only police, but police from a position of understanding and compassion more so than oppressive force.
Thank you. Mr. Glass.
I appreciate this question because earlier today, my colleagues and I spoke directly with Montgomery County Police Department Chief Jones about the budget for public safety. And in my conversation with Chief Jones, I highlighted the fact that Montgomery County is part of and experiencing the same statistics that other jurisdictions are nationwide, that there are increased crime rates, largely due because of some of the stresses of the pandemic over the last 2 years, but we're also experiencing a shortage in staffing. And the National Police Foundation recently reported that 86% of local police departments are experiencing staffing shortages, just as we are. And in my conversation, I highlighted the fact that we have a program called the Cadet Program that was started a few years ago, but
15 seconds.
But hopefully my colleagues and I will increase support for that. So we have more community policing. We have more people from our community serving in law enforcement, because the reality is we want more people from our community who know our community, who trust our community, taking care of all of us.
Thank you. Mr. Albernaz.
This is an important moment. Crime is at a very significant high locally across Montgomery County and across this country. And we have to address the underlying issues that are leading to more crime in the first place, which include housing instability, economic challenges, but also re-engage our youth through positive youth development and wraparound services that I've been involved with for more than 20 years. And we also have to ensure transparency and accountability, but also acknowledge that police positions are difficult on a good day and that these are hard jobs and we ask too much of our officers. And so my message to Chief Jones would be that to ensure that we help address the recruitment and retention issues, we have to do all that we can to reasonably uplift and support our officers by ensuring they're compensated well and ensuring that they have the training and support that they need to be successful. This time demands for all of us to work together, to be on the same team, because we can't keep pointing fingers at each other. We must work cohesively and together as a community to address these challenges.
Thank you. Ms. Brooks.
I think in order to interrupt cycles of violence and crime in our community, we need two things. One is to address the root causes of those cycles of violence and crime, and the other is to actually have trust that in addressing those, people are going to be treated with dignity and respect for their humanity. I think we have to make sure that we are addressing core issues of poverty, of housing insecurity, of food insecurity, of educational inequity. that drive how people get engaged with law enforcement and with our criminal justice system. And then when it comes to accountability, if we want community members to be able to work with police, we have to make sure that they know that they will be respected and will be kept safe regardless of their identity or where they live or their income or disabilities or any of the other factors that we have seen engaged in police misconduct here in our county.
15 seconds.
I think that's a basic call. And if we have police officers who struggle with that call, then we really need to reevaluate the foundation of what we believe policing is about.
Thank you. Mr. Tawando.
Thank you. I grew up in this county, as I mentioned. I lost a friend to gun violence who was involved in the criminal justice system. I'm one of the 1 in 2 Black men who, by the age of 21, has felt handcuffs and been arrested in this country. We have significant challenges. I'm also the author of the first piece of criminal justice reform legislation in the county's history, the Law Enforcement Trust and Transparency Act, followed by several other actions that have been supported by all my colleagues. We can do both things. We can address the societal causes of underlying crime, like carjackings that are up with our youth, by wraparound services and supports, by taking things off of police plates. They're not mental health advisors. They shouldn't be responding to people dealing with homelessness. We've taken steps in those directions, but we can do more. And then we can rebuild relationships.
15 seconds.
I have a bill, Community Informed Police Training Act, which will leverage our 600 plus students at Montgomery College who are studying criminal justice that reflect our community, that can be a new form of policing and public safety. So we can do all these things together.
Thank you. Ms. Sales.
So I believe in 21st century policing. We've been able to leverage technology during the pandemic, and we should be looking forward to how we can do the same in policing. Being in the city of Gaithersburg, having experienced 2 shootings with police involvement, having to go through the process of waiting for the investigation to be complete, working with the public to better understand the process and quelling any additional protests, working with our police department, most importantly, to modernize our police force, to ensure that all of our officers had body cameras, even our undercover officers. And so it's going to take a stakeholder approach, more
15 seconds.
And it starts with the top. It starts at the top. It starts with leadership. And I would hope that Chief Jones, the Fraternal Order of Police, and council members can meet more often to ensure that these policies are implemented in a more smooth manner.
Thank you. Mr. Goldberg.
And the question was, what advice would we give to Chief Jones? And I would take it one step further. I think the elected leadership of Montgomery County, both the council and the executive, need to come up with a clear, concise vision of how the community wants to be policed, and then communicate that to our entire public safety community and to the community in general, so that we all know what to expect. I think where there's particular pockets of safety issues, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can say we're going to have more enforcement, but we can also say we're going to keep people, safe and minimize police interactions in other areas. I think we are incredibly intelligent people. I think we are incredibly talented. Pun intended to the moderator. We always try and get a dad joke in there. But we can do all of these things. We can keep people safe. We can treat people with respect and dignity.
15 seconds.
We can look at the root causes of crime, which is economic opportunities. If we can do that, the Montgomery County has an incredibly bright future.
Thank you. Mr. Hucker.
Thanks, Ann. There's a number of things I agree with a lot that's been said. First of all, we need to focus on public safety, not just policing. So that means more support for mental health and addiction treatment. In particular, our police are spread far too thin. New York Times reported that 40% of their calls are not due to violent crime. Gabe and I have led efforts to fund mobile crisis units, so we have trained social workers close by, scattered around the county, so they can respond to residents in mental health crisis rather than just armed officers. We need a much more effective crisis response system that's culturally competent, that can handle calls that involve residents from 150 nations, that speak over 150 languages. We've pushed to hire social workers, in particular, to work with the homeless in Silver Spring and elsewhere. And we need to increase
seconds.
to expedite our HR to hire them much faster. And we need better training for our police to deal with mental health issues. We also need to fill our vacancies and get police who come from Montgomery County and incentivize them to live in Montgomery County. So they look like Montgomery County, they go to church or mosque here, they join the scouts here, they pay taxes here, and they have neighbors here. And we have a property tax break that's proposed to do just that as well.
Thank you. On that note, we're going to wrap up this at-large session. On behalf of all of us at Bethesda Beat and Bethesda Magazine, thank you to the candidates for sharing your views, and thank you to you, the audience members, for choosing to spend your time with us, learning about the candidates ahead of the primary, which is scheduled for July 19th.